Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Ponderosa North for the love of Bonanza. Well, in the next few episodes, I'm going to do some character studies of our favorite family, the Cartwrights, the four Cartwright men, starting with, hi, Sarge, starting with Joseph, aka Joe, aka younger brother, aka Scamp, aka, of course, Little Joe. Now, I think Little Joe is, or the reference to Little is a regional sort of nickname referring to like a junior, like Big John, Little John, that kind of thing. I'm not really sure how he came to have the name Little Joe. I think it's a regional thing. Doesn't make sense that his father's name was Ben, though. So if anybody knows about how Little Joe got the name Little, reference to his name, I mean, he was a little guy, but I have a feeling it's more of a regional sort of reference to a junior. Anyway, let's talk about our wonderful Little Joe. The emotional, impressive, impulsive, funny, fierce, proud, moody, quick-tempered, impetuous, impatient, but charming Little Joe. Here's a couple of pictures of him showing all kinds of emotions. He was very diverse. He wore his emotions on his sleeve. There was no hidden agenda with Little Joe. You knew exactly what he was thinking. He couldn't hide anything. He was easy to tear and easy to irritate. He was just a very emotional, outwardly affectionate. Everything was hyper with Little Joe. He was either really mad, or he was really sad, or he was really happy. There was no in between. It was totally an extreme with Little Joe. He was, like I said, he was small in stature, but everything else about Little Joe was huge. He had a personality the size of Nevada. It was enormous. Little Joe was an athletic little fella. He was very agile. I've always mentioned he does swing mounts. Nobody else does a swing mount on that show. It takes great dexterity and agility and upper body strength. He was very. Can you imagine Little Joe as a toddler trying to keep up with him? As he misbehaved, which he did often, as they refer to in the show. I'm sure he misbehaved, but he probably couldn't catch him. He was gone. He'd misbehave, and then out of sight he'd be. Speaking of misbehaving, the man loved to fight, didn't he? Holy cow, he just would start a fight just for the fun of it. He loved to fight. He sometimes, it backfired on him, and he'd get the snot kicked out of him, and sometimes it was deserved. I mean, you didn't need to start this thing. He was a very good fighter, though, under the tutelage of Adam and Hoss. In the Julia Burlett story, Adam is saying, I've told Joe 1,000 times, keep those elbows in. And Hoss would say, yeah, we got to teach Little Joe how to fight a lot dirtier than that. So he got into a lot of fights. He was robbed a lot. He was ambushed a lot. He was beaten up all the time. He was kidnapped and shot. The guy was so strong. I don't know how he recovered from all these injuries. He was even blinded at one point. It was just, he just took all this horrible physical abuse. And he always came through because we needed him for the next episode. But and he loved to gamble. He was constantly gambling. Had constant money troubles. I always thought, where do they get their money, these guys? How were they paid? Were they paid by the hour? Were they paid a salary? Were they given an allowance? I don't know, but they were constantly seemed to have no money. They were landowners, I mean, Hoss would go into the store and say, give me 2 bits for some candy. And they go, you don't need 2 bits. Well, why don't you have at least 2 bits? Doesn't make any sense. So Joe was constantly trying to make money. using his brother to do so. And yeah, I don't know how these guys got paid. He was also, little Joe was always smitten with some little gal. Any little pretty thing that came onto the Ponderosa, inevitably he would ask her to marry him. You know, they'd spend a couple of days together. Will you marry me? It happened all the time. In the war comes to Washoe, and the woman from Baltimore, or the lady from Baltimore, he was constantly asking women to marry him. And they'd say yes, but inevitably the curse would set in and they'd get shot or get pneumonia or be punctured with a pitchfork, or some horrible fate they would succumb to. Relationships with, I also wanted to mention the gunslinger, little Joe the gunslinger. Very quick on the draw. That goes back to the athletic part of his life. He was a very, very agile fellow, very quick, very, very jackrabbity, I think. He was hard to catch. He was very fast, and everything was like this with little Joe, you know, all over the place. So relationships. The relationship with Ben was just a very simple, loving relationship. Where's my picture of, there it is, of just a very simple father-son relationship. But Ben was sort of, he was sort of always seeming to prop up Joe's confidence. He was always sort of in his corner, you know. I guess being the youngest, I mean, I'm the youngest, so I can relate. There is bullying, and his brothers did bully him, and he was always, you know, ready to puff up, and you know, and Ben was always there to lift him up, to always be on his side, to always trust him and give him kudos where it was deserved, and just bolster his self-esteem. So it was a very simple, loving, respectful relationship between him and his father. Him and Hoss, well, come on. These two were just absolute best friends. If they hadn't been brothers, they would have been best friends anyway. They just loved each other, and it was a very simple a relationship as well. They were closer in age. They were 6 years apart, and I think Hoss really sort of took Joe under his wing as an older brother. I mean, Adam was, you know, 12 years older than Joe. He had a whole other life by the time Joe was born. And speaking of him and Adam, well, it was just contentious from the start, and Hoss was always in the middle to sort of settle them down. That was sort of the attraction for me, was that conflict between Adam and Joe. They knew how to push each other's buttons, and that was from the pilot. Right from the pilot, they were in quite a rambunctious fight in the house, where they were just pitted against each other. And they always had this north and south thing. Even though Joe was born on the Ponderosa, he kept, I'm a southerner, I'm from the south. Well, you're not. Your mother was from the south. And Adam was always, I'm from the north, I'm from the east. Well, no, you were born there, but you left there when you were an infant. They were both Nevadians. They were both, you know, from the territory of Nevada. But there was this constant north-south kind of thing happening with them. So I'm just going to end with a scene from Hoss and the Leprechauns, which kind of sort of cements the relationship between Joe and Hoss. Hoss has found these little green men running around. They turn out to be circus performers, but little Joe goes and finds Hoss in a meadow, in a field, looking for these little green men. And the scene goes something like this, because little Joe catches him in this little folly. So it goes something like this. Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hoo! Woo-hoo! I'm calling my dogs. Woo-hoo! Where are you? I'm over here. Oh, don't you go away. Oh, I won't. Boss sent me to bring you home to supper. So, I mean, they were always getting each other's goat. They were always so much comedy, so much fun. So we have our little Joe from a boy, growing from a little boy to a man by the end of the series. That's my character study of Little Joe Cartwright. See you next time on Ponderosa North for the love of Bonanza. Bye for now.